The rain beat hard against the zinc roof as voices rose inside the compound. A slim, dark-skinned woman named Beatrice, mid-20s, soft-spoken, with neat cornrows wrapped in a small black scarf, stood at the doorway clutching the hand of her little girl, Adora, age 6, who wore a faded pink Ankara dress and white plastic sandals. On the concrete floor lay their suitcase, half open, clothes spilling like secrets. Across from them, her late husband's relatives, Auntie Ngozi, 40s, fair-skinned with a loud geel and a wrapper tied high on her waist, and Chike, 35, tall, bearded, in a wine-colored senator outfit, pointed at the door. "Carry your load and go," Auntie Ngozi snapped, snapping her fingers as if to chase away a stray goat. "Our brother is gone. This house, the shop, the cars, everything belongs to his family now." Adaora's small fingers tightened around her mother's. "Mummy, are we going somewhere?" she whispered. Beatrice swallowed. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "We will be fine, my daughter." "Fine where?" Cheek barked, pushing the suitcase with the tip of his shoe until it slid and hit the threshold. "Your time is up," thunder cracked. The compound gate creaked open and 2 neighbors peered in, whispering, pretending not to see. Beatrice lifted her chin, eyes glistening but dry. She looked at the portrait of her husband, Namdi, early 30s, deep brown skin, low cut, warm eyes, hung on the sitting room wall with a black ribbon. They had buried him just yesterday. The smell of jollof from mourners' plates still hung in the air. "Please," Beatrice said softly, "let Adaora sleep tonight. Tomorrow we will talk." "No," Auntie Ngozi said, voice sharp like broken glass. "This very night. Leave now." Cheeky stepped forward and yanked the handle of the suitcase. The sudden pull ripped the zipper. Adaora's school uniform and Beatrice's modest blue Ankara blouse fell out and soaked on the wet step. "Uncle, please," Adaora cried. "Don't uncle me," he snapped. Then he bent, grabbed a shallow iron trunk from beside the sofa, the one Beatrice used to keep her wrapper and the envelope of old rent receipts, and flung it toward the door. The trunk burst open, and a small brown envelope slipped under the center table. Beatrice saw it slide and freeze. Her heart quivered. She knew that envelope. It was the last thing Namdi had touched in the bedroom 2 nights before he died. The night he had sat up late, whispering on the phone and scribbling numbers in his small diary. He had tucked it under the trunk for tomorrow's talk, he said, smiling. Tomorrow never came. Another clap of thunder shook the house. Cheek jerked his thumb at the rain. "Out, before I call boys to carry you." "Don't touch my mother!" Adaora shouted, surprising even herself. Silence followed. The child's voice, high and fierce, hung in the air. Cheeky stared. Auntie's nostrils flared. The neighbors drew closer to the gate. Beatrice bent, gathered the scattered clothes with small, careful motions, then straightened and looked at Namdi's photo again. Her lips moved without sound. Rain hammered the veranda, watery curtains shimmering between them and the night. She reached for the brown envelope under the table, but Cheeky's foot landed on it, pressing down. "What is this?" he asked, sensing value. "You are hiding something." Beatrice's breath caught. Cheek lifted his shoe and scooped the envelope just as lightning flashed, and before Beatrice could speak, he tore it halfway open. "Stop!" she cried, but the wind banged the door wide and the envelope fluttered like a wounded bird. Papers slipped, caught by the wet breeze, then skidded against the leg of the chair. A name in bold, a company Beatrice had never seen, a broker's letterhead, dates, gleamed under the short fluorescent light. Before anyone could read it fully, the compound's security man, Babasola, 50s, stocky, in a green cap and rain-spotted shirt, hurried in with a small black phone raised. "Madam Beatrice, somebody has been calling you and calling you. Unknown number. He say it is urgent." Cheek turned, startled. Auntie clicked her tongue. Beatrice's eyes darted from the half-torn envelope to the buzzing phone and back to the portrait on the wall. She took the phone with a trembling hand. "Hello?" she said. A calm male voice answered over the hiss of rain. "Good evening, Ma. My name is Mr. Okoro from Palm Grove Securities. I'm calling regarding a purchase instruction signed by your husband 2 days before his passing. It concerns a very large share allotment in your name. We need you to confirm reception of the document today." Beatrice swayed. Auntie and Cheeky froze. The room shrank to the soft hum of the bulb and the hiss of rain. "Did you hear me, Ma?" the voice repeated. Beatrice looked at the torn brown envelope in Cheek's fist, its papers wet at the edges, the date stamped bold and recent. Her mouth opened to speak. And then the light went out. The compound fell into darkness as the rain roared louder, and someone moved fast beside her in that sudden black. The day before the funeral, Beatrice had moved like a gentle shadow through her own house. She wore a simple navy Ankara wrapper and a plain blouse, her cornrows tied back with a black scarf. Her face rarely needed makeup. Her beauty was gentle, honey-soft, the kind that invited respect and quietness. She greeted the women cooking in the compound kitchen, thanked the youth who set chairs under canopies, and kept Adara close. Namdi, her husband, had been a kind man, humble with quick laughter and honest hands. He ran a small but fast-growing building materials shop near Mile 12 in Lagos. He wore short hair, kept his beard neat, preferred comfortable native tops to suits, and loved fufu and oha soup on Saturday. People said he had a calm spirit. He also had a good head for numbers. His friends joked that he could smell profit the way some people smelled rain. In their 5 years of marriage, he and Beatrice had dreamed small, steady dreams. A second-hand car that didn't rattle, a better school for Adara, a small parcel of land to build on someday. They did not chase loud things. They chased peace. On Friday nights, they shared roasted corn and pear on the balcony and counted stars. 2 nights before he died, Namdi had returned from town late, face damp with the city's heat, eyes bright with a secret joy. He leaned on the bedroom doorframe and watched Beatrice fold Adaora's uniform. "Bea," he had said, voice low, "I want to do something that shows you I am thinking of your tomorrow." She smiled. "I like my today with you." He laughed, then sat at the small wooden table, pulled a slim brown envelope from his bag and brought out papers with numbers. His phone glowed as he spoke with someone named Okoro. He wrote a few lines, signed, and slid the envelope under the trunk by the dresser. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said, pressing her hand. "It's a surprise." But tomorrow went out in a sudden flash. A rain-slick road, a bus that swerved, a crash that swallowed sound, angels moving where men could not. Beatrice did not cry loud when they told her. She held Adara and rocked. Neighbors came and went, bringing food, bringing noise. Auntie Ngozi arrived with her gale tied like a crown and took charge of everything, chairs here, rice there, money box there, like a queen claiming a field. Chaik walked about with a face heavy and eyes too dry. On the day they brought Namdi home, Beatrice placed a simple white lace scarf over her cornrows and wore a plain black wrapper. Adara clung to her, hair in 2 neat puffs tied with black ribbons. Beatrice moved through people like water finding the easy path. She thanked, she nodded, she prayed. But she noticed small things. How Auntie had already taken the keys to the shop, how Cheeky pulled the car documents from a drawer like they were always his, how people asked them questions, and not her. She said nothing, because grief can make mouths slow. After the burial, the compound changed. The mourners thinned, the umbrellas folded, the music softened, the relatives stayed. That evening, before the storm deepened, Adara drew with crayons, orange sun, blue house, smiling stick daddy, on the sitting room floor while Beatrice washed plates in the kitchen. She overheard voices near the corridor. "The deed of the house is in his name," Auntie was saying. "So is the shop. Everything belongs to us now. Tradition." "And the cars?" Cheeky replied. "We sell one, share the money, use the other for shop runs. The girl can go to her mother's people." Beatrice's hands paused in soapy water. She dried them quickly and stepped into the hall. "Sister, she said softly. We can discuss these things. Please, we can do it gently for the sake of Adora. Auntie turned, smile thin. Don't worry, we will be gentle. But from tonight, you will not sleep in my brother's bedroom. Pack your things to the small store by the backyard. Tomorrow, you will go to your people and we will lock the gate. Beatrice's breath slowed. This is my home. Auntie scoffed. Your home? In which name? Cheek checked his watch and muttered, We should do it now before the rain starts. Beatrice walked past them into the sitting room, gathered Adaora's crayons, and set them aside. She stared at Nnamdi's portrait, the curve of his smile, the intention in his eyes. She remembered the envelope, the numbers. We'll talk tomorrow. Her fingers tingled. The first thunder rolled across the sky like a drum warning a village. Rain hissed as if someone poured a basin from heaven. The power flickered but held. Auntie and Cheek followed her to the sitting room and stood between her and the bedroom hallway. You can carry your bag, Auntie said, voice rising. Now. Neighbors paused at their doorways, watching the dance of shadows and rain. Someone whispered, this life. Another said, God will judge. Beatrice knelt before Adaora. Go and wear your slippers, she whispered. Are we going to Grandma's? Adaora asked. We are going to a safe place, Beatrice said, brushing a stray curl from the girl's forehead. And we will be brave. Then the push began. Not a slap, not a punch, just the steady push of will and voice and hands that took what was not theirs. Cheeky pulled the suitcase. Auntie opened the front door wide. The wind rushed in, and with it, the smell of wet earth and petrol and the taste of salt. When the iron trunk crashed and the envelope flashed, Beatrice's hope sparked like a match in a storm. She reached, but Chike's boot pinned it. He sensed it. Greed has a nose. What is this? He said. He tore it. The papers glinted, fat with meaning. The date, 2 days before, shone like a tiny star. The security man hurried in with the phone, and the voice of Mr. Okoro flowed like a new road through a forest of trouble. A very large share allotment, in your name. The room held its breath. Then Nepa blinked, and the world turned black. In the darkness, a chair scraped. Feet shuffled. Auntie hissed. Adaora gasped. A hand brushed Beatrice's wrist, fast, rough, snatching at the papers. Another hand, smelling of rain and engine oil, shoved her shoulder lightly. She lost balance and knocked her hip on the center table. The brown envelope was gone from where it had fallen. Hold her! Auntie's voice sliced the dark. Light! Somebody bring light! A match flared in the corridor, then died, then flared again. Baba Sola fumbled with a rechargeable lamp. It blinked to life at last, washing the room in cold blue. And in that thin light, Beatrice saw Chika at the doorway, the brown envelope tucked inside his wet senator top, eyes wild and jaw set. Auntie blocked the path with her wide wrapper, lips curled. Beatrice straightened slowly, head high, pain throbbing in her hip but spirit standing taller. She thought of Nnamdi's laugh, his promise, the numbers, the date, the love that made him think ahead. She looked at Adaora, small and brave. She looked at the neighbors at the gate, faces full of murmurs. She looked at the portrait on the wall. Give me my husband's papers, she said, voice steady, rich with something new. Chike smirked. What papers? Mr. Okoro's voice still drifted from the small phone in Baba Sola's hand. Hello, madam, are you there? It is urgent we confirm tonight. The rain quieted a little, as if it too wanted to hear what would happen next. Auntie reached to lock the front door, and that was when a fist banged on the gate so hard the metal shuddered, and a deep voice called out, Open up! Police! If you're hoping justice finds Beatrice and little Adaora, tap like to send them strength, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Your support helps this story continue. The banging on the gate thundered louder than the rain. Police, the voice repeated. Open this gate before we break it down. Everyone in the sitting room froze. Cheek's hand stiffened over the envelope under his senator top. Auntie Ngozi's eyes darted like trapped fireflies. Beatrice stood still, her chest rising and falling, her hand wrapped tightly around Adaora's. Baba Sola, the security man, hurried toward the gate with his lamp. The neighbors pressed closer, whispering in excited tones. "Police has come, oh! God has answered this woman." The gate creaked open, and 2 uniformed officers entered, their boots splashing water into the compound. One, tall and broad-shouldered, carried a flashlight. The other, lean with a thick mustache, held a notebook in his hand. "Who is Mrs. Beatrice Namdi?" the taller one asked, scanning the crowd. Beatrice raised her hand slowly. "I am." He nodded. "We received a call from Mr. Okoro of Palm Grove Securities. He said we should ensure the safety of some important documents belonging to you. He also mentioned suspicious activity." His sharp eyes swung toward Chike and Auntie Ngozi. Beatrice swallowed. "Officer, those are the very documents my husband left for me." She pointed directly at Cheek's chest. "He has them." Cheek laughed, though the sound cracked under his throat. "Officer, don't mind her. She is grieving. This is family matter. No police business." He stepped backward, clutching his senator top tighter, but the taller officer moved forward. "Family matter? Why are you holding what belongs to her? Bring it out now." The room grew tense. Adaora's small voice piped up, clear and sharp. "Uncle, give my mummy her papers." Gasps rippled from the neighbors. Even the police officers glanced at each other. Cheek's face hardened. "You people want to disgrace me in my brother's house?" He made for the door, but the mustached officer blocked him with one swift step. "Not so fast," he said, his hand brushing his holster. "Bring it out before I take you to the station tonight." Rain dripped from the roof, steady as a drumbeat. The cold lamp in Baba Sola's hand cast long shadows on the walls. Beatrice watched as Cheeky slowly pulled out the soggy brown envelope. Before the officer could take it, Auntie Ngozi lunged forward, snatched the envelope from Cheeky, and tore it open wide. Pages scattered, fluttering to the wet ground like white birds with broken wings. Gasps filled the room. "Now nobody gets it," she screamed. Her eyes were wide, almost wild. Beatrice fell to her knees, gathering the wet papers with desperate fingers. Adaora helped, clutching one sheet with colorful company stamps. The tall officer bent too, retrieving another page before it soaked completely. As the officers pieced together the damp documents, Mr. Okoro's voice still echoed faintly from Baba Sola's phone. "Please ensure those documents reach her hand. They are her legal ownership of the shares. They cannot be destroyed." The taller officer looked up, jaw tight. "These are official securities papers. Madam Beatrice, they belong to you. And let me warn—" He turned sharply to Auntie Ngozi. "Any attempt to destroy or steal them again is a criminal offense." Whispers spread among the neighbors. "Ha! So the husband left everything for her. God is wonderful. See how wickedness is shamed. Those relatives wanted to throw her out, but look at God." Auntie stood stiff, eyes burning, wrapper slipping from her shoulder. Cheek stared at the floor, shame shadowing his face. But before relief could settle, another twist unfurled. From the doorway, a new voice rang out, low, commanding, filled with authority. "Hold it right there. That woman does not deserve a kobo of my brother's sweat." Heads turned. Standing in the rain-soaked doorway was Elder Okafor, Namdi's uncle, an old man with a grizzled beard, tall frame, and a walking stick carved like a serpent. He was respected in the extended family, feared even because his word often ended all arguments. And his eyes were fixed on Beatrice with a look that made the room go silent. Adaora clutched her mother tighter. The taller officer straightened. "And who are you, old man?" "I am the head of this family," Elder Okafor declared, thumping his stick against the wet tiles. "And I say she must leave this house tonight. Shares or no shares. She has no place here." Beatrice's lips trembled, but her back straightened. She had a diora in one arm, the soaked documents in the other. The portrait of her husband on the wall seemed to look down with quiet strength. The officers glanced at each other. Neighbors leaned in. The storm outside quieted, as though the heavens waited. Elder Okafor raised his stick again, pointing straight at Beatrice. She leaves this compound now, or I will call the Elders' Council, and if she resists, let the gods themselves judge her. Beatrice's heartbeat thundered. The documents in her hand shook. Would the police stand with her, or would tradition bury her? Subscribe so you don't miss what happens in the next chapter, and tell us in the comments. Should tradition win, or should justice speak louder? The crack of Elder Okafor's staff against the wet tiles echoed like a gunshot. The compound went dead silent. Neighbors held their breath. Even the officers hesitated, glancing at one another, unsure whether to confront tradition or enforce the law. Beatrice stood still, her wrapper soaked at the edges, her face pale but resolute. Adaora hid behind her mother's hip, clutching the damp share certificate in her tiny hands. Elder Okafor's voice thundered, "This woman has eaten enough from my brother's sweat. He is gone, and now she thinks she can inherit like a son? In our land, women carry nothing. Let her go back to her father's house." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Some neighbors nodded quietly in fear of the old man's reputation. Others shook their heads in disapproval. The taller officer finally stepped forward, planting his boot firmly. "With due respect, sir, the law is clear. These documents show legal ownership. This is not about tradition, it is about written proof. If you interfere again, you will answer at the station." But Elder Okafor only sneered, raising his chin. "The law." He spat the word. "Does the law know the customs of our fathers? Does the law live in this compound? I am the law here." He struck his staff again, sparks of anger flashing in his eyes. Beatrice's lips parted. Her voice trembled at first, then grew steady. "Father, I have respected you. I have kept silent even as my daughter and I were thrown into the rain. But let me remind you, this is not the time of our ancestors. My husband made sure of that. His voice still speaks in these papers, and I will not let his last words be buried." Gasps followed. Adaora squeezed her mother's hand tighter. Elder Okafor's nostrils flared. "You dare talk back to me?" "Enough!" the mustached officer barked, stepping between them. "If this continues, we are moving everyone to the station. Madam Beatrice, hold on to those papers. As for you, sir," he turned to the elder, "any attempt to obstruct justice will not end well." But just as the tension thickened, Auntie Ngozi suddenly dropped to her knees, wailing loudly. Her jeel tilted sideways as she clutched the hem of Elder Okafor's wrapper. "My lord uncle, don't allow strangers to shame us like this," she cried. "Are we to fold our hands while an outsider claims all our brother's wealth? What will people say? That we let her walk over us? That we became beggars in our own blood's house?" Her cries pierced the air, twisting the mood. Some neighbors murmured in sympathy, others frowned, sensing her hypocrisy. Elder Okafor placed a heavy hand on her head. "Stand, my daughter. We will not be disgraced." Then his eyes shifted coldly to Beatrice. "If you refuse to leave peacefully, then tomorrow morning we summon the Council of Elders, and when they speak, not even the police will save you." Beatrice's throat tightened. Summon the elders? She knew what that meant. Old voices, older prejudices, and a verdict wrapped in so-called tradition. By dawn, they could strip everything from her. Adaora tugged at her wrapper. "Mummy, are they going to take Daddy's gift?" Tears burned her eyes, but she knelt and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Not while I still breathe, my child." The taller officer sighed, clearly frustrated. "Madam, keep these documents safe, but I advise you to find a lawyer before morning. This matter is bigger than what police can settle tonight." Beatrice nodded faintly, though fear coiled in her chest. A lawyer? Where would she find one by dawn? At that very moment, headlights flashed at the compound gate. A sleek black Jeep rolled in, its tires splashing water. The murmurs grew. Who could be arriving at such an hour? The jeep door opened and a tall man in his late 40s stepped out, wearing a gray suit despite the rain. His bald head gleamed under the security lamp, and his glasses reflected the light. Everyone turned. He adjusted his tie and spoke calmly, his deep voice carrying authority. "My name is Barrister Uche Okonkwo. I represent Palm Grove Securities. I was sent personally by Mr. Okoro to deliver and safeguard these documents, and I will not stand by while this widow and her child are threatened." The crowd gasped. Even the officers stepped back slightly, relieved. Elder Okafor's face darkened like a gathering storm. "So now lawyers come into my compound to challenge me?" But the barrister did not flinch. He pulled a leather folder from under his arm, dry despite the rain, and raised it high. "These are certified duplicates of the share purchase. Beatrice is the legal owner of substantial holdings worth millions. If anyone dares interfere, I will not only take them to court, I will freeze every account tied to this family until justice is done." The words hit the compound like lightning. Neighbors murmured in awe. Auntie Ngozi covered her mouth. Chiki stepped back, sweating. Beatrice's knees nearly buckled. Her late husband's last promise, his silent shield, was rising like a fortress around her. But Elder Okafor only tightened his grip on his staff, eyes blazing with defiance. "You may have law. You may have papers. But tomorrow, we shall see whose voice carries more weight, yours or the voice of the ancestors." He turned and stormed toward the inner rooms, his stick thudding against the floor. The barrister looked at Beatrice and spoke firmly. "Madam, gather your things. Tonight you and your daughter will not stay here. I will take you somewhere safe until this war is settled." Beatrice clutched Adaora close. Relief mingled with fear. She was safe for now, but tomorrow would bring a battle bigger than anything she had ever faced. The neighbors whispered, "Will the elders win, or the law?" The rain finally slowed, but tension filled the air thicker than the storm. And in the dim compound, as the officers helped Beatrice lift her suitcase, Auntie Ngozi's voice hissed like venom through the shadows. "This is not over. We will bury you with the very papers you hold." Beatrice turned, eyes steady. "Let's see who gets buried in shame." And as the jeep's door opened for her, a fresh clap of thunder split the night sky, signaling that the real battle had only just begun. Tap subscribe so you don't miss what happens in the next chapter and comment below. Do you trust the elder's counsel or the lawyer with the law on his side? The ride in Barrister Uche's jeep was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the distant hiss of fading rain. Beatrice sat in the back seat, clutching Adaora tightly while the wet envelope rested on her lap. Adaora leaned her head against her mother's chest, eyes drooping with exhaustion, but her tiny hands refused to let go of the paper stamped with her father's name. The barrister glanced at them through the rearview mirror. His expression was stern, but not unkind. "Madam Beatrice, I know you are shaken, but tonight was just the beginning. Elder Okafor will not rest. By morning, he will summon the Council of Elders. That gathering could either strip you bare or strengthen your case, depending on how prepared you are." Beatrice's voice was low, weary yet steady. "Barrister, I have nothing but my husband's love and these papers. They want to bury us with shame, but I must fight. For Adaora." Adaora stirred, her voice soft and innocent. "Mummy, Daddy said he would surprise you. Is this the surprise?" Beatrice kissed her daughter's forehead, tears filling her eyes. "Yes, my love. This is Daddy's gift, and we must protect it." The jeep rolled into a gated compound in Surulere, where the barrister's office doubled as a safe house. He ushered them into a modest guest room with clean sheets and a warm lamp. "Rest tonight," he said. "Tomorrow morning we meet the elders. But remember this, truth and paper together can silence even the loudest tradition." Beatrice nodded. Her spirit felt bruised, but the embers of courage glowed within her chest. The sun rose pale and reluctant, casting a dim light over Namdi's family compound. The air was thick with murmurs as villagers and neighbors gathered. The Council of Elders sat under the large mango tree at the center, 5 old men in flowing white wrappers, red caps, and coral beads. Their walking sticks rested against their knees like swords ready for judgment. At their center sat Elder Okafor, his serpent-carved staff gleaming in the sunlight. His eyes were proud, his shoulders squared. He looked like a man ready to win a war. Beatrice arrived with Barrister Uche and Adaora by her side. She wore a simple black Ankara dress with white embroidery. Her cornrows were neat, her face unpainted, yet her beauty shone with quiet dignity. Adaora wore a navy blue gown, her hair styled in 2 fluffy puffs tied with white ribbons. The crowd parted as they approached. Some whispered, "That is the widow." Others muttered, "Let's see if she survives today." The head of the council, Elder Ease, raised his hand. His voice was deep, worn with age yet commanding respect. "We are gathered to settle the matter of the late Namdi's estate. His wife Beatrice claims inheritance. His family says otherwise. Today the truth will speak." Elder Okafor stood first. He tapped his serpent staff on the ground. "Great elders, people of our land, my brother is gone. Tradition is clear. His wealth returns to his bloodline. A woman cannot inherit. She is a stranger to this family. If we allow it today, tomorrow, other women will rise and scatter our heritage. We must not let the law of strangers destroy the ways of our fathers." The crowd murmured approval. Some clapped. Auntie Ngozi fanned herself proudly. Then Elder Ease turned to Beatrice. "Speak, woman. Why do you claim what is not yours?" Beatrice rose slowly. Her voice was calm, carrying the weight of her heart. "Fathers of the land, people of my husband's blood, I loved Namdi with all that I am. I was not a stranger to him. I was his wife, his partner, the mother of his child. When he lived, I stood by him. When he died, I buried him with dignity. And before he left this earth, he made provision for me and our daughter. His voice still speaks through these papers." She lifted the damp share certificates. The crowd gasped. Elder Okafor sneered. "Forged papers, brought by outsiders. Do not let them blind you." Barrister Uche stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Forged? These are certified documents from Palm Grove Securities. Here are duplicates, dry and sealed. Namdi himself signed them 2 days before his death. His wife is the sole owner of millions in shares, and by the law of this nation, not even tradition can erase that." The elders shifted uncomfortably. Elder Ease leaned forward, stroking his beard. "Millions." The barrister opened his leather folder, laying out crisp copies of the documents. The ink gleamed. The stamps were bold. The signatures were unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "So Namdi truly secured his wife." Adaora, innocent and unafraid, stepped forward clutching one damp certificate. Her small voice rang out, "This is Daddy's handwriting. He said it was for Mummy." The elders stared. Even the hardest among them faltered. But Elder Okafor's face twisted with fury. He slammed his staff on the ground. "This is witchcraft. The law of strangers cannot stand against the gods of our fathers. If we allow this, we spit on our ancestors." The air grew tense. The crowd waited. The council's decision hung like a sword. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the tension. A car horn at the gate. Heads turned. A black SUV rolled in. From it stepped a tall man in a sleek suit, accompanied by 2 uniformed men. He carried a briefcase stamped with the logo of Palm Grove Securities. He introduced himself in a booming voice. "I am Mr. Okoro. I came in person to testify. Namdi personally purchased and signed these shares for his wife, Beatrice. And as the managing director of this firm, I confirm that she is the legal owner of wealth greater than all his other properties combined." The crowd erupted. Women clapped. Men shouted. Auntie Ngozi's face drained of color. Chike staggered backward, sweat dripping from his brow. But Elder Okafor's eyes burned with defiance. He raised his staff one last time. "If the council sides with her, then I curse this land. The gods will not forgive." The crowd gasped. The elders exchanged nervous glances. Elder Ease lifted his hand, his voice firm. Enough, Okafor. The gods of justice are not blind. The voice of the dead man speaks in these papers, and today, justice will stand. He turned to Beatrice. By the council's decree, and by the law of this land, you are recognized as the rightful owner of your husband's shares. You and your daughter will not be cast out. The compound exploded with cheers. Adora clapped her tiny hands. Beatrice's knees buckled with relief and tears streamed freely down her face. But as the joy spread, Elder Okafor's lips curled into a dangerous smile. This is not the end, woman. Wealth is a curse when wolves circle it. You may have won today, but you will not rest in peace. The crowd fell silent again. Beatrice held Adora close, her heart steady, her spirit braced, because she knew this victory was only the beginning of a greater battle. If you're standing with Beatrice in her fight for justice, smash that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss the twists ahead, and tell us in the comments, what do you think Elder Okafor will try next? The compound remained restless long after the council's decree. Some rejoiced, whispering that justice had prevailed. Others murmured uneasily, fearing the wrath of Elder Okafor and the curse he threatened to invoke. Beatrice stood in the center, her daughter's small hands clasped around her waist. She felt relief, but also a deep, unsettling tremor in her spirit. The look in Elder Okafor's eyes was not one of defeat. It was one of vengeance. Barrister Uche placed a hand on her shoulder. Congratulations, madam. You've won this round. But beware, men like Okafor do not fall quietly. You must prepare for the storm that follows. Beatrice nodded faintly. She knew he was right. That evening, Beatrice returned to her late husband's home for the first time since being driven out. Neighbors gathered as she and Adora walked in, escorted by the police and Barrister Uche. Her presence carried a new weight. No longer the weeping widow, she was the woman who had stared tradition in the face and survived. Adora skipped ahead, excited. Mummy, can I sleep in Daddy's room tonight? I want to feel close to him. Beatrice's heart squeezed. She touched her daughter's cheek. Yes, my child. Tonight we sleep in his room together. But even as she spoke, her eyes caught movement in the shadows near the backyard. A dark figure slipped out through the side gate. She froze. Who is there? She called. No answer. Baba Sola, the security man, hurried over. Madam, don't mind them. Since morning, some strange faces have been hanging near the compound. I fear Elder Okafor has sent boys to watch you. Barrister Uche frowned deeply. Then we must act fast. Your life, and your daughter's, is in danger. Beatrice's blood ran cold. Later that night, while Adora slept soundly in Namdi's bed, Beatrice sat at the edge of the mattress, staring at her husband's portrait on the wall. The house was quiet except for the hum of crickets and the occasional bark of a distant dog. She whispered, Namdi, they want to bury us, but I will fight. For our daughter, I will fight. Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint rustling outside the window. She stiffened, clutching Adora protectively. The rustling grew louder, then a sudden clang as if metal scraped against the gate. She hurried to the window and peered out. In the dim moonlight, she saw 3 masked men climbing the fence, their forms hunched and swift. One carried a crowbar. Another whispered instructions. Beatrice's heart pounded. She shook Adora awake gently. Shh, baby, wake up, we must be very quiet. Adora blinked, confused. Mummy? Not a word, Beatrice whispered, wrapping a wrapper around the child and carrying her toward the door. Just then, the living room window shattered with a loud crash. A heavy boot landed on the floor. Shadows moved inside. Beatrice gasped and hurried down the hallway, clutching Adora close. From outside, a rough voice barked, Search everywhere, get the papers. Tonight that woman learns her place. The intruders had come, for her, and for the shares. At that very moment, headlights flashed outside the gate. Tires screeched. A horn blared. The intruders froze, startled. The gate burst open, and a convoy of police trucks rolled in, sirens flashing. Officers jumped out, torches cutting through the darkness. "Hands up!" one of them roared. The masked men scrambled, leaping over the fence, but were quickly overpowered and dragged to the ground. Beatrice clutched Adaora tightly as the police swarmed the compound. Barrister Uche rushed in, breathless, having arrived with the convoy. "Are you safe?" he demanded. Beatrice nodded, though tears streamed down her cheeks. "They wanted the papers. They wanted my life." The taller officer from before lifted one of the captured men by the collar. "Confess. Who sent you?" The man spat on the ground but said nothing. The officer struck him lightly with his baton. "Talk." Finally, the man growled. "It was the elder. Elder Okafor sent us. He said we should collect the widow's papers and make it look like thieves did it." Gasps echoed through the compound. The neighbors who had gathered to watch covered their mouths in shock. Beatrice's heart hardened. Elder Okafor's hand was now exposed, his deceit laid bare. But Barrister Uche's face was grave. "This is dangerous, madam. Okafor will deny it, and his influence is great. He will not stop until he sees you ruined. We must take this matter higher, into the courts, where even his staff and curses cannot silence the truth." Beatrice tightened her grip on Adaora. The fear in her chest transformed into something fiercer. Resolve. She lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the tears. "Then let him bring all his curses. Let him bring all his power. I will not run anymore. If it is war he wants, then war he shall get. I will protect my daughter, and I will honor my husband's last gift, even if it costs me everything." The officers led the captured intruders away. Neighbors whispered in awe. The night air buzzed with tension, a storm heavier than rain itself. And somewhere in the shadows, unseen, Elder Okafor watched from afar, his serpent staff glinting faintly under the moonlight. His lips curved into a cold smile. "The game has only begun," he muttered. "If you believe Beatrice must take this fight to court and expose Elder Okafor completely, smash that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss the fiery next chapter, and tell us in the comments, what punishment should Elder Okafor face for sending those men? The morning sun broke over the compound, but instead of peace, it brought a heavy silence. The neighbors whispered in corners about the midnight attack, their eyes darting nervously toward Elder Okafor's house across the street. The men who had confessed were already in custody, yet fear lingered, fear of Okafor's shadow. Beatrice stood at the veranda, Adaora holding her hand. The little girl's eyes were wide, still shaken from the night before. Beatrice bent low, brushing her daughter's cheek. "Don't be afraid, my love," she whispered. "Your father's gift will protect us, and I will never let anyone take you away." Barrister Uche arrived early, his briefcase under his arm, his eyes set with determination. "Madam, last night proved one thing. We cannot let this stay in the compound. Okafor will deny everything, and tradition will cover him. We must go to court. That is where the truth will burn brightest." Beatrice nodded. She knew he was right, but her heart trembled at the thought of standing in court against men who carried both tradition and power. The High Court of Lagos was packed that afternoon. Journalists crowded the gates, their cameras flashing. Neighbors from the compound came to witness. Even strangers gathered, eager to see the battle between a widow and a feared elder. Inside, the courtroom was grand, its walls lined with wooden panels, its air filled with the smell of dust and law. Beatrice sat beside Barrister Uche, her cornrows neat under a black headscarf, her eyes clear though her fingers trembled slightly. Adaora sat with a kind woman from the church, her little hands clasped around a small Bible. Across the aisle, Elder Okafor stood tall in a flowing white agbada, his serpent-carved staff resting beside him like a weapon dressed in respectability. Auntie Ngozi sat behind him, her geel as high as her pride. Cheek avoided eye contact, sweat already gathering at his forehead. The judge, A stern woman with glasses perched low on her nose called the court to order. Her voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. Today, we hear the case of Mrs. Beatrice Nnamdi versus Elder Okafor and family concerning the estate and securities of the late Mr. Nnamdi. Barrister Uche rose first. His voice was calm, deliberate, yet filled with fire. My lord, this case is not merely about property, it is about justice. A husband, before his untimely death, secured a future for his wife and child by purchasing substantial shares in her name. But instead of honoring his last act of love, his relatives cast her out, tried to destroy the documents, and even sent men to silence her. We stand here not only to defend her rights, but to ensure that the law protects every widow and every child from greed and wickedness. Murmurs of approval swept the room. Beatrice lowered her head, tears pricking her eyes at his words. Then it was Okafor's turn. He rose slowly, leaning on his staff, his eyes sharp and burning. My lord, I am no stranger to this land. I am an elder, custodian of tradition. The woman before you is a guest in my family, nothing more. The ways of our fathers are clear. Property returns to blood, not strangers. If we allow the law of outsiders to trample on our customs, we invite curses upon our land. I did not send men to attack her. Lies. These are the tricks of a woman desperate for wealth. Do not be deceived. Gasps filled the room. Some nodded in agreement with him. Others shook their heads, disgusted. The judge's face remained unreadable. She motioned for the first witness. The police officer from the night of the attack stepped forward. He saluted. My lord, we caught 3 men inside Madame Beatrice's compound. Under questioning, they confessed that Elder Okafor sent them. We have their signed statements here. The courtroom erupted. Shouts of shame and liar rose from the crowd. Okafor banged his staff on the ground, his voice booming. Lies! Coerced statements! Do not believe them! The judge raised her gavel. Order. Barrister Uche smiled faintly. My lord, beyond their confession we have proof. Palm Grove Securities will testify directly. He motioned and Mr. Okoro entered, carrying his briefcase. The crowd buzzed with excitement. He took the stand. My lord, I am the managing director of Palm Grove Securities. 2 days before his death, Mr. Nnamdi purchased shares worth over N$500 million in his wife's name. I personally processed the transaction. Here are the certified documents and video evidence from our office showing Mr. Nnamdi signing the papers. He handed over a USB drive and sealed files. The clerk placed them before the judge. Beatrice covered her mouth, overwhelmed. The room roared. Even the journalists scribbled furiously, cameras clicking. Auntie Ngozi clutched her gill with trembling fingers. Cheek buried his face in his hands. But Elder Okafor did not flinch. He rose again, his voice rising like thunder. My lord, this is a plot. They seek to rob a family of its heritage. If the court rules in her favor, then let the gods of this land strike all who betrayed tradition. Suddenly, he raised his serpent staff high, chanting words in Igbo too old for many to understand. The room grew cold. The lights flickered. Adaura whimpered in the back, clinging to her Bible. Gasps echoed. Some people crossed themselves. Others whispered, "He is invoking the spirits." The judge banged her gavel, but her hand shook slightly. This is a court of law, no theatrics. Yet for the first time, doubt rippled through the room. Would the law be strong enough to silence the ancient curse that Elder Okafor dared to call? Beatrice rose suddenly, her voice trembling but fierce. You can call your gods, Okafor, but the God of justice will answer louder, and I will not bow. The room erupted again. All eyes turned to the judge. She raised her gavel, face stern, ready to deliver a ruling. When suddenly a man in a black suit burst into the courtroom holding a folder. His voice was breathless, but firm. My lord, I have urgent evidence concerning Nnamdi's estate. Evidence that changes everything. The courtroom gasped. Beatrice's heart stopped. Elder Okafor's eyes widened, fury and fear flashing at once. What was in that folder? And whose side would it favor? If you're eager to know what shocking evidence just arrived in court, hit like to keep this story alive. Tap subscribe so you don't miss. The entire courtroom froze as the man in the black suit stepped forward, sweat dripping from his brow. He bowed quickly before the judge and handed over the thick folder. The clerk rushed it to the bench, and the judge's sharp eyes scanned through the first few pages. Her lips parted slightly, betraying her usual composure. "What is this?" she demanded. The man adjusted his tie nervously. "My lord, I am Mr. Emeka, a senior staff member at Palm Grove Securities. I was away on medical leave when the transaction was processed, but upon my return, I discovered an additional file connected to the late Mr. Nnamdi's account. It is a sealed instruction, locked to be opened only upon his death." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Beatrice's heart pounded in her chest. Elder Okafor's grip on his serpent staff tightened. The judge motioned for silence and opened the sealed file. She read aloud, "In the event of my death, I, Nnamdi Chukwudi, direct that my wife Beatrice be the sole beneficiary of my shares and accounts. I also instruct that my daughter, Adaora, be listed as joint heir to all properties purchased under my name. This is my will, signed and witnessed." The room exploded. Shouts of, "God is great!" and "Justice!" rang out. Beatrice clasped her hands over her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. Adaora, sitting at the back, clapped her small hands with innocent joy. But Elder Okafor roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Forgery! Lies! Do not be deceived! This is their trick!" The judge glared at him. "Elder, enough. The signature matches every record on file. The witness signatures are valid. This is binding." Barrister Uche rose, his voice strong and unwavering. "My lord, what more proof is needed? The late Nnamdi not only purchased shares for his wife, but also wrote a will, making her and their daughter sole heirs. Elder Okafor's greed and interference are exposed. This case should not continue another minute." The crowd applauded, but Okafor slammed his staff down so hard the floor vibrated. His eyes glowed with fury as he shouted, "If you dare strip me of my brother's estate, then let the gods of this land strike down all who mock tradition. This woman will not live to enjoy a kobo of this wealth." Suddenly the lights flickered violently. The air grew thick and cold. A low hum seemed to rise from nowhere, rattling windows and sending a chill down every spine. Some spectators screamed and ran out. Others fell to their knees in prayer. The judge banged her gavel desperately. "Order in this court, order!" But Okafor had already begun chanting in a tongue too old for many to understand, his serpent staff raised high. Shadows seemed to crawl along the walls. Even the officers at the back of the courtroom stepped forward nervously, hands on their weapons. Beatrice rose to her feet. She was trembling, yes, but her voice rang out like steel cutting through darkness. "You can curse me, Okafor. You can call all the spirits you know. But I stand with the living God, and no weapon formed against me shall prosper." Her words cut through the panic like a torch in a cave. The murmurs shifted. People began to chant prayers, some clapping, others calling on God aloud. The courtroom became a battlefield of faith against fear. Adaora, innocent yet unshaken, stood on her seat at the back and shouted with all her strength, "Leave my mummy alone. Daddy wanted her to have it." Silence fell. Even Okafor's chant broke for a heartbeat. The child's voice, pure and fearless, pierced deeper than any curse. The judge seized the moment. She raised the will high and declared, her voice booming above the storm, "This court recognizes Beatrice and her daughter as the rightful heirs to Nnamdi's estate. By law and by will, all shares, properties, and accounts belong to them. Case closed." The gavel struck like thunder. The crowd erupted in cheers. Beatrice collapsed to her knees, clutching the papers, tears streaming as Adaora ran into her arms. Barrister Uche placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You've won, madam. Against tradition, against threats. You've won." But even in the celebration, Elder Okafor's laughter echoed. It was deep, dark, and chilling. He pointed his serpent staff at Beatrice. You may win in court, but you have awakened enemies greater than me. The gods will not sleep. You will never know peace. He stormed out of the courtroom, leaving a trail of fear in his wake. Beatrice held Adaora tightly, whispering into her ear, We will have peace, my love. Even if I must fight the whole world, you will have peace. Yet deep inside she knew Okafor's threat was not empty. The battle of law was over, but the war of spirit had just begun. If you believe Beatrice's victory in court should be celebrated, smash the like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss. The joy of victory still echoed in the courthouse, but as Beatrice and Adaora stepped outside, a chill wind swept through the crowd. Some people whispered prayers, others avoided her eyes, fearful of the curse Elder Okafor had declared. Barrister Uche walked beside her, firm but wary. Madam, today was a great win, but don't take his threats lightly. Men like Okafor cling to more than tradition. They wield fear, and fear is a dangerous weapon. Beatrice clutched Adaora's hand, her voice steady. I will not live in fear. My husband's last gift will not be wasted. Adaora will grow in peace. But in her heart she knew peace was still far away. That night, back at the compound, unease hung thick in the air. The neighbors who had once gathered to cheer her victory now kept their distance. Some crossed themselves when she walked past. Others whispered, She challenged an elder. The gods may strike. Inside the house, Adaora slept soundly in her father's bed, her small arms wrapped around his old shirt. Beatrice knelt by the bed, praying silently, asking God for strength. Suddenly the lights flickered. The window banged open, though the air outside was calm. A sharp smell of burning herbs wafted in. Beatrice froze, her heart hammering. She stepped to the window and saw a clay pot at the doorstep, its contents smoldering, smoke curling upward in eerie spirals. Before she could react, Baba Sola, the security man, rushed in. His face was pale. Madam, don't touch it. That is juju. They've placed sacrifice at your door. Beatrice's knees weakened. Okafor, she whispered. Baba Sola nodded gravely. They want to scare you out. But you must be strong. If you show fear, they win. Beatrice took a deep breath, walked to the doorway, and with trembling hands lifted the pot. Gasps rose from neighbors watching at their windows. She carried it past the compound gate and smashed it against the ground. The shards scattered, smoke rising into the night. Her voice rang out clear and fearless. No curse can stand against me. My God is greater. The crowd murmured, astonished. Some clapped quietly. Others shook their heads in awe. But even as she walked back inside, a strange sound echoed from afar, the beating of a drum, slow and heavy, like a heartbeat in the night. And with it, the faint chant of voices carried by the wind. The next morning, Barrister Uche arrived with urgent news. Madam, things are escalating. Okafor has filed a petition with the Traditional Council to overturn the court's ruling. He claims the judgment insults the ancestors. If they side with him, your safety could be in danger. Beatrice's chest tightened. Can they truly overturn the law? No, Uche said, but their influence can turn people against you. They can make your victory worthless in the eyes of the community. Beatrice sank into a chair. Adaora crawled onto her lap, hugging her tightly. Mummy, are they still angry? Yes, my child, Beatrice whispered, but we will face them. That evening a messenger arrived, an old man with a crooked back and weary eyes. He carried a small calabash covered with palm leaves. He placed it at Beatrice's feet and spoke in a trembling voice. Okafor says you must appear before the shrine tomorrow or the gods themselves will judge you. The neighbors gasped. Some whispered that no one defies such a summons and survives. Beatrice's face hardened. Tell him, she said slowly, that I do not fear shrines. I will stand where truth must stand. The old man bowed and left silently. Barrister Uche leaned close, concern etched on his face. "Are you sure, madam? Tomorrow may not be a battle of law but of spirit. And that ground, it belongs to him." Beatrice held Adaora close. Her voice was soft but unbreakable. "If I run, he wins. If I bow, my daughter learns fear. Tomorrow I will stand, even at his shrine." The next day, the village gathered at the ancestral shrine under a giant iroko tree. Red cloths hung from branches. Cowrie shells glistened in the dirt. Drums beat slowly, filling the air with dread. Elder Okafor stood at the center, his serpent staff raised, his agbada flowing like the wings of a bird of prey. Beatrice arrived, dressed simply in a white wrapper and scarf, Adaora at her side, Barrister Uche just behind her. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some pitied her, others waited to see her fall. Okafor's voice thundered, "Before the gods of this land, let us see if this woman's claim can stand. If she is lying, let the earth swallow her. If she speaks truth, let her live." The drummers struck harder. Smoke rose from a clay pot at the foot of the iroko tree. The air grew heavy, pressing on every chest. Beatrice stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear clawing inside her. "I have no lies to speak. My husband left his wealth for me and my daughter. The papers are true, and the God I serve will not let darkness prevail." The crowd gasped at her boldness. Even the drummers faltered. Okafor sneered. He raised his staff, chanting words that made the ground tremble. The smoke thickened, swirling like hands reaching for Beatrice. Adaora clutched her mother's wrapper, eyes wide with terror. And then, without warning, the serpent carved on Okafor's staff cracked from top to bottom, splitting in two. The crowd screamed. Some fell to their knees. The drummers dropped their sticks. Okafor staggered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Beatrice stood unmoved, her hands lifted. "Your staff is broken, Okafor, and so is your power." Okafor roared, his voice shaking with rage. "This is not over, woman. If the gods have failed me, then men will not." He turned sharply and stormed away, his agbada whipping like a storm. The crowd buzzed in awe and fear. Some bowed to Beatrice. Others whispered, "Truly, her God is strong." But Beatrice's eyes never left the path Okafor had taken. She knew this battle was far from finished. If you believe the breaking of Okafor's staff is a sign that justice is near, hit like, tap subscribe, and comment. Do you think Elder Okafor will return with even darker schemes, or has his power finally been broken? The shrine grounds buzzed with fear and whispers long after Elder Okafor stormed away. The sight of his serpent staff breaking was something no one had ever seen. Some called it a sign of the god's anger. Others swore it meant Beatrice's god had overpowered him. Beatrice walked away from the iroko tree with Adaora's hand in hers, her face calm, but her spirit heavy. She knew Okafor was not finished. His pride was wounded, his power shaken. That made him even more dangerous. Barrister Uche walked beside her. "Madam, what happened today will be spoken of for years. But don't be deceived. Okafor will not rest. He has lost in court, and now in the shrine. The only battle left for him is one of desperation. Be ready." Beatrice nodded, her voice steady. "Let him come. We have survived storms before. We will survive him." The following week seemed almost peaceful. The neighbors no longer whispered with fear when they saw Beatrice. Some even greeted her warmly, calling her Nwanyi Obiike, a woman of courage. Adaora returned to school, skipping happily into her class with her small pink bag. For the first time since Namdi's death, Beatrice allowed herself to breathe. She even began visiting Palm Grove Securities with Barrister Uche to arrange the transfer of shares. The papers were signed, the accounts secured. Slowly, her husband's final gift began to take root in her hands. But peace has a fragile skin. One evening, as she prepared dinner in the kitchen, Baba Sola rushed in, panting heavily. "Madam, trouble." Beatrice's heart leapt. "What is it?" "Okafor has gathered men at the town hall. He is accusing you of killing your husband to inherit his wealth. He says the accident was no accident, that you planned it. The wooden spoon dropped from Beatrice's hand. Her knees weakened. What? Babasola nodded, breathless. He has witnesses, or so he claims. The town is boiling with talk. Adaora peeked into the kitchen, clutching her doll. Mummy, what's wrong? Beatrice forced a smile for her daughter, but inside her chest burned. How far would Okafor go? That night the town hall overflowed with people. The air was thick with heat and suspicion. At the center stood Elder Okafor, his broken staff replaced with a new, shorter one, carved with strange markings. His voice rang through the hall. This woman is not a victim. She is a murderer. She plotted with outsiders to kill my brother and steal his wealth. I have proof. Drivers who saw her near the accident scene. A witness who claims she argued with her husband before his death. Should we let a snake live in our house? Gasps echoed. Some eyes turned toward Beatrice as she entered with Barrister Uche at her side. She wore a simple green Ankara wrapper, her face pale but determined. Adaora clung to her hand. Beatrice's voice trembled, yet it rose strong. You lie, Okafor. My husband was my life. His death broke me. But even in death, he loved me enough to leave me this gift. You dishonor his memory with your greed. Okafor sneered. Then let us test your innocence before all. If you are blameless, swear by the shrine that you had no hand in his death. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Beatrice. Swearing at the shrine meant binding herself under Okafor's power. Refusing would make her look guilty. Barrister Uche whispered, Don't do it, madam. That is a trap. But Adaora tugged at her mother's wrapper, her small voice clear. Mummy, Daddy told us the truth always wins, don't be afraid. Beatrice straightened, fire sparking in her chest. She looked at the crowd, at Okafor's proud face, at the memory of Anamdi's smile. I will not swear at your shrine, Okafor, she declared. I will stand only before the God who sees all, and he knows I am innocent. The hall erupted. Some cheered, others shouted angrily. Okafor's eyes blazed. Then you admit guilt. You cannot deny the voice of tradition. But just as the noise reached its peak, the doors of the hall burst open. 2 police officers strode in, followed by a man in a driver's uniform. His face was weary, his hands shaking. My lord, the taller officer shouted, this man has confessed. He was the driver who witnessed the accident, and he has something to say. The driver stepped forward, voice trembling. It was not Madame Beatrice. The accident happened because a truck lost its brakes. I saw everything. She was never there. Elder Okafor paid me to lie, but my conscience has burned me. I cannot keep silent anymore. The hall fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned to Okafor. The elder's face twisted with rage. He raised his short staff, ready to strike the driver, but the officers grabbed him. Gasps filled the hall. Some shouted, shame. Others cried, justice. Beatrice pulled Adaora close, tears streaming down her face. Her voice rang like a bell. Your lies are finished, Okafor. You have tried law, shrine, and now false witnesses. But truth cannot be buried. The officers dragged Okafor forward, but even in chains, his voice thundered with venom. You may think you've won, woman, but wealth is a curse. You will choke on it before long. His words echoed as he was pulled from the hall. Beatrice held Adaora close, her heart pounding. Relief washed over her, but fear lingered. For she knew, Okafor's downfall was not yet sealed. If you believe the truth has finally cornered Elder Okafor, smash that like, hit subscribe, and comment. Do you think this is Okafor's final downfall, or does he still have one last card to play? The town hall remained in an uproar long after the police dragged Elder Okafor away. Some clapped and shouted, "Justice at last!" while others whispered nervously, fearing his last words about wealth being a curse. Beatrice stood in the center, Adaora clasped tightly in her arms. Barrister Uche touched her shoulder. Madam, we are close to the end. But beware, Okafor is a snake. Even cornered, he may still bite. Beatrice nodded, her tears glistening but her voice firm. Let him come with his last poison, we will not bow. That night the compound was unusually quiet. The moon shone brightly, casting long silver shadows across the walls. Beatrice tucked Adara into bed, humming softly the lullaby Namdi used to sing. Suddenly a knock thundered on the door. Who is it? Beatrice asked sharply. A calm voice replied. It is me, Barrister Uche. Open quickly. Beatrice frowned. She knew Uche never visited so late. Still, she unbolted the door. The moment it creaked open, a rush of masked men stormed inside. She screamed, clutching Adora. One of the men barked, Give us the share documents or we burn this house down. Before she could reply, a shot rang out in the air. The men froze. From the gate, police officers flooded in, weapons raised. Behind them stood the real Barrister Uche, his face set with grim determination. The intruders were overpowered swiftly, but as the police pulled off their masks, gasps filled the compound. Among the captured was Chica, Namdi's own cousin, sweat pouring down his face. Beatrice staggered back, her heart heavy. You too, Cheek? Cheek avoided her eyes, muttering, Okafor promised us wealth. He said if we finished you, all would be ours. The officers dragged them away, but Beatrice knew. Okafor's hand was behind it all. Even from detention, he was pulling strings. The next morning, news spread fast. The judge, furious at the attempted attack, summoned an emergency hearing. The courtroom overflowed once again. Okafor was brought in, shackled but unbowed. His eyes burned with hate as he scanned the crowd. He looked older, weaker, but his tongue was still sharp. You may bind my body, he sneered, but you cannot bind my spirit. This woman will never enjoy peace in this land. Barrister Uche stood. My lord, the evidence is overwhelming. This man has abused tradition, law, and even violence to rob a widow. He must pay dearly. The judge's voice was cold and firm. Elder Okafor, you stand guilty of conspiracy, attempted theft, and threats against the life of Beatrice and her daughter. By the law of this land, you are sentenced to 20 years imprisonment with hard labor. The gavel struck. The hall erupted. Some shouted for joy, others wept. Okafor roared, struggling against his chains. You cannot cage me, you cannot... But his voice was drowned out as he was dragged away, his serpent spirit silenced at last. Beatrice fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Adora ran into her arms, clutching her tightly. Mummy, she whispered, is it over now? Beatrice kissed her forehead, smiling through her tears. Yes, my love. It is over. Daddy's gift is safe, and no one can take it from us again. The crowd applauded. Some women ululated in triumph. Men clapped their hands. Neighbors who had once doubted her now hailed her as a woman of strength. Barrister Uche leaned close, his voice low but warm. You have won, madam. Not just the wealth, but the respect of your people. You turned fear into courage. Beatrice lifted Adaora high, her voice ringing out. This is not just my victory. It is every widow's victory, every child's victory. Let the world know the truth cannot be buried, and justice will always rise. The hall shook with cheers, and as the sun poured golden light through the high windows, Beatrice felt a peace she had not known since Namdi's death. Her husband's promise had carried her through storms, shrines, and shadows, and at last, she and Adaora could breathe freely. If you believe Beatrice's courage deserves to be remembered forever, smash that like, tap subscribe so you don't miss more powerful African folktale stories, and comment below. What lesson do you take from Beatrice's victory?